Live. It's Burke Asheville Investors Live. So if you you're obviously a member since you're watching, but help us grow and help us bring lots of new people in. Having said that, let's get started. So as we talk about this every single week, we try to answer questions, Q&A on Mondays, Wednesdays, and on Fridays. And so last time, when we were talking about last week, I was having a rant about the whole thing in terms of if you're a real estate agent, guess what? The market is changing. And not only the market's changing, the industry of real estate is changing. And there were a few more things that I saw. Inman had some interesting articles, and I saw some real estate agents talking about this. And I thought what this guy had to say was pretty good. He's like, listen, if you are, and this is one of the reasons why I got out of real estate sales. I think real estate sales is a wonderful field. There are not too many things that you can do in life where you're going to make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 selling real estate. You really don't need a skill set as such. And I mean, you could have barely finished high school and you can make a lot of money doing real estate sales. That's just a fact of life. But yet the industry has been changing over time, and it's gotten more and more competitive in a lot of different ways. So, and what's happening is now there's a big change. So if you look at a lot of the teams at a lot of wonderful companies, like if you take, be it something like Keller Williams, Remax, a lot of the places last few years, what had happened to a lot of agents, people who were producing a lot of volume, what they were doing was they're buying leads. They're buying leads from Zillow, they're buying leads from different places, and then they were giving it out to their buyers' agents. And so they had these huge, massive teams. And agents were producing a lot. So it was a lot of GCI, gross commissions earned, that was coming in. And then they would, so it'd be like, oh my God, I have all this production. My question to you is this: if you're a real estate agent that has massive amount of production, the question is not what you produce. The question is how much you keep, meaning how much do you invest? So think about this. And if you make, let's just say $80,000 doing something, right? Or if you make 200,000, or if you make $500,000, there's a big difference, right? But my contention is this: at 80,000, if you're living in a big city, you can barely survive, right? In today's economy. 200,000, you're doing pretty decent. If you kind of live at a decent quality of life, you can live fairly well, and you can probably save some money on top of that. But if you made 80 and you spent 80, if you made 200 or 220 and spent 220, if you made $500,000 and you spent it, and this is what you do every single year, really how much you make is irrelevant, right? Because that money is gone. That money is spent. And the more your burn rate, meaning the more you're used to spending, the harder it is to cut down, right? And because if you're not saving anything, if you're not investing anything, how much money you make is irrelevant, because the more you make, the more your burn rate, right? So that's just what it is. So whenever you're making no money, making a couple $100,000, $500,000 seems like a lot, right? Or making $1 million, it seems like a lot. Once you make that, then you realize that it's really not how much you make. You obviously want to make a decent amount of money so you have a decent quality of life. But what is more important is, what did you save or what did you invest away? And my biggest problem as a real estate agent was that I made decent money, yet I didn't invest anything into my future. See, the difference today is this: that every single year I invest not only a portion, a big chunk of what I make, but I keep reinvesting what the investments produce, right? When I used to be at one time, so there are kind of stages of life for most of us, right? One is poor. Poor is a mentality, right? A poor person goes, well, I'm never going to make it. It's rigged. Only the rich people get richer, blah, blah, blah. So that's poor. Poor is a mentality. Number two is broke. Broke means that we have all been broke at some point in our lives, because if your parents didn't give you a lot of pocket money, or they didn't just pay for everything for you, and they didn't give you a lot of excess money, you were probably broke as when you were in high school, or when you're in college, or when you're at some point in your life. And that's totally okay. Broke is temporary, right? Broke is not something that is final. Broke is not a destination. It's a time in our lives, and it's perfectly fine. And then you have what is called rich. See, rich to me is a very arbitrary term. Because think about this. If you're in college and your parents give you a lot of extra money on top of if they're paying for your education, you may feel richer compared to your other roommate or compared to your other friends, right? You have a nice car, your parents paid for, let's say your college education is paid for, so you feel richer. You didn't earn anything, right? It just happens to be that your parents clearly were wise with their money. They either invested, they saved. So now you are enjoying a part of their benefits. And it's great, right? I mean, there's nothing better than to be a part of the Lucky Sperm Club, right? Where your parents basically made a lot of money, or you're born in the right family. I mean, it's great, wonderful, good for you. Nobody else can duplicate it, but good for you. And then later on, what happens is once you get done with college, let's say somebody gets a job making $100,000, right? It's like they get a nice job. They're like, wow, man, he's making so much money. Now, if suddenly you get a job making 120, now you feel richer than your friend who made $100,000, right? Or 2 years later, they get a promotion. Now they're making 150, right? They went to a different company. They move. They're like, oh yeah, man, I'm making a lot of money, until you go out and make 200. Right? So rich is very relative. If you live in a 5,000 square foot house, somebody next door lives in a 7,000 square foot house, right? You have 2 cars, they have 4. From the outside, it may look that person is richer, but are they? See, just because they choose to spend every penny they make on a house that they live in, or on a car, or on different things, that is very relative. Right? So rich to me is very relative, because the more expensive neighborhood you move to, generally, there are going to be people that are going to be much richer, meaning they may have bigger houses, may have bigger stuff. Really, what matters is not rich. What matters is wealth. And wealth is defined as such that, so there was something that one time I said, and which I was like, my God, I mean, I came up with this. This is a pretty good thing. And that was this. Some people measure their wealth, right, or rich, in the size of the house they live in. I measure my wealth in the number of houses that I own and other people live in, right? Meaning, what am I saying here, right? That if I live in a big house and I have to keep running and running and running on the treadmill to pay for the big house, nothing wrong. You should be proud you're working that hard so you can afford a nice house. You should be very proud of it. But what it would be better if you don't have to keep running, if somebody else is running on the treadmill to pay for your house. That to me is wealth, right? Because beyond a certain amount of money, right? If you live in Chicago suburbs, let's say, if you make $120,000, you make good amount of money. Do you make a lot? No, but not by any means. But you're making pretty good amount of money. And depends how many, I mean, if you have a spouse to support, if you have kids, that's also going to change. Because as you have kids, as you have other things, you have more expenses, so you need to make a little bit more. But beyond a certain amount, somewhere between $100,000 to $150,000, right? It's a pretty decent living you have. What really matters is, do you have an offset? Meaning that if you make a decent amount of money, then if you have 5, 10, 15 rental properties that every single month keep bringing in cash flow, that to me is true wealth, and that is what you should go for, right? So there are the people who are on one extreme who are like, oh my God, every time you have any equity, strip out the equity, buy more properties. I don't believe in that. And then you have the other extreme, which is the who's that guy on the radio show? Wonderful guy, very, very conservative in terms of his investment. Oh, Dave Ramsey, right? Dave Ramsey is on this scale, is this extreme. I think somewhere in the middle is, because what Dave Ramsey says, I agree with every single thing wholeheartedly, except one thing. And that one thing is that never have any debt, right? Is what he's saying in principle, I agree with him wholeheartedly. But the problem is this: if you don't have any debt, right, the problem is you can't build. And I wanted to bring this up because actually I was listening to a section today from Dave Ramsey, and it was a really good section. I thought it just came on my feed, and it was between him and the guy Graham. Hey, what's that guy's name? Graham. He makes good videos. Lori, huh? And Graham Stevens was showing him his portfolio of real estate of 4 or 5 properties in California, each property $1.5 million. And maybe over time, Graham had paid off. Wonderful show, wonderful videos he makes, and they're very reasonable. They're nothing crazy, right? And he had paid off a couple properties completely. So he had a $4 million something portfolio, right? Now, my point to what Dave Ramsey always says is, hey, no debt, no debt, no debt. And I actually agree with him to a large extent, but my problem is this, that if I have no debt and if I want to invest, what happens is this, that if I'm going to buy real estate, it's going to take me a very, 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 very long time to be able to save that much money to buy a property for cash. And if I had done that back in 2008, by the time I had 100,000 saved up, it would have been 2015, right? If I just done it based on keep selling real estate and save and then invest, or I would have to do it in the stock market, right? So my point is that I think what makes more sense is that you buy real estate, you add debt to it because that increases your leverage and it helps you grow. And then over time, as you start growing and growing, you have to have a period of investing back. And over time, then you start gradually paying down, meaning any returns that you produce from the investments, you do not spend, right? And then you do not go out and buy properties that are stupid. You buy properties with 20 or 30% equity in them so that over time, every time you buy a property, you get richer. Not only in terms of your cash flow, but you get richer in terms of your equity. And there's somebody I had hired a couple of years ago, and this gentleman said, man, it really doesn't matter what your net worth is, right? I happen to very disagree with him vehemently. It does matter what your net worth is, right? It does matter how much equity you have, because you can't flip yourself. You can't be a developer and develop yourself into rich, right? Because even if you have a lot of money, what are you going to do with it, right? If you have $1 million, $2 million saved up, I know a lot of people that we have a bunch of people in Mastery that have $1 million or $2 million saved up, right? And God bless them. Generally, they're grayer. They're a little bit balder if they're men, right? If they're women, they're going to be a little bit grayer. Why? Because they've worked all these years to save that up. But then today, what they're doing is they do loans. They do a lot of loans to a lot of people in Mastery to create a return. And I don't know where I got off on this diatribe today, but anyways, it was interesting because when I was thinking about the whole real estate change that is coming with this big lawsuit, and it's happening in every single state. It's going to happen in every single state that buyer's agency is changing. If you're a buyer's agent, you're going to have to figure out how to get paid because now there are all these antitrust lawsuits that are coming down the pike, one of which is already done. There's another big one in Illinois, and I really, really believe that there's still time for you to start investing. And I'm passionate about this, especially for real estate agents, people who are in the title business, mortgage business, that guys, we are as a group closest to some of the best, right? Compared to the stock market, compared to cryptocurrency, compared to anything else, right? The best tool to invest is real estate, right? I don't care what Grant Cardone says, anybody says, if you look at it, any American, any American that owns a piece of property, what is their largest amount of money invested in? It's real estate, right? It's real estate. So look at anybody who's retiring. Where is their largest net worth? It's real estate. If they have not been stupid over a period of time, if they've paid down some of their debts in terms of their home mortgage, that's one of their biggest assets. And so we as real estate agents, now I'm not a real estate agent because I sent my license back last year to the state. But in general, like you as a real estate agent, you who are closest to the business, if you're in any of the trades, if you're in the construction business, if you're a real estate agent, you're a real estate attorney, you're like an agent for a title company, you're a loan officer, you're some of the people that are helping everybody else build wealth, right? I mean, the other day I had this attorney make this statement, a stupid statement, and this attorney does a lot of closings, right? Most stupid, oh yeah, man, I do a lot of closings, yeah, man, I help everybody else buy properties. Well, you idiot, why are you not doing it for yourself? right? If you're so good, you understand so much about real estate, then how come you have nothing to show for it, right? It's a simple question, right? It's a simple question is that supposedly, if you know so much, then how come you don't have the results? And this is important to understand, that it is important that if you are somebody that does well for themselves, guys, you have to own assets over a period of time. They need to be paid down over a period of time so you can have ultimate freedom, that is cash flow and the time freedom, right? Just running on the treadmill is certainly not going to get you there. So anyways, I'm going to end that diatribe. Let's get into the questions. So number one question was, what is on your checklist of things that you need to get done when you're ready to close a property? So number one is going to be number one is that, did you check with your title, with your insurance company, if you need flood insurance on the property? You're like, but Andrew, I don't really care because I'm buying the property for cash. It doesn't really matter. Well, yes, it doesn't matter, but wouldn't you want to know that if you need flood insurance or not, because that can be $2,000 or $3,000. If you're going to put a mortgage on it, that's going to be required at some point, right? That's number one. Number two, you want to check with the village, town, county, what is going to be needed as far as their permits, as far as if you need a rental license, if you're going to do an Airbnb, right? Can you do that? Right? That is a big thing. I just talked to somebody today, actually, earlier, and they're like, Andrew, I bought this property. Okay, great, good. They're like, I was going to do an Airbnb, but now I found out Chicago doesn't allow it. I'm like, well, no kidding, right? I'm like, well, why didn't you do the research before? They're like, well, I thought people were renting out 2 and 3 unit Airbnbs. And I'm like, well, they are, but then you have to live in the property, right? Otherwise, you're not able to do that. Chicago is not going to is not going to allow you to do that, right? Did you look into that? Well, no, I forgot. I'm like, it's on the checklist. Number 3 is going to be, what are the inspection requirements that are needed from that particular town and or village? So perfect example would be I'll give you an example of Evergreen Park. Evergreen Park requires that you pull permits all the way. And they require that you do an architectural drawing, right? This is required. That's it, period. You're buying a property in an LLC, they will 100% require it, 100%. And I mean this sincerely, guys, that even if you're going to do a 12-inch square in paint, believe me, they are going to require it. It doesn't cost that much. It costs anywhere from $1,700-$1,800 to about $2,000 to get the drawings done. But that's what they require. But you need to know what the requirements are. And like in Evergreen Park or some of these towns, if they say update plumbing, update electrical, believe me, they're making you going to do the whole house. And generally, when that's all that they say on the inspection report, that means that probably that house does not have a foundation. So you may want to check that that is something important to understand, right? Number 4 thing I would check is, what are you going to do with the property? Meaning, is there the use that you're going to have with that particular property? Is that a use that is going to be allowed? So I'll give you an example for that. It pertains to zoning, and this pertains to the existing use. So in some of the properties you're using the property, the homeowner's using the property as a 4-unit. This was a property that just came up in Little Village, right? They've been using it as a 4-unit. It's actually a 3-unit property. This person who's buying the property, they're paying a little bit too much. And I suggested to them, I would not buy the property. They're like, but Andrew, the numbers still work. I'm like, no, the numbers only work if you use it as a 4-unit. It's not a 4-unit building because the basement cannot be used as a, but I'm like, well, I'm just going to illegally do it. I'm like, that's fine. I understand you're illegally going to do it. I can't stop you from it. I'm not stopping you from it. But when you're buying the property, don't buy it because it's a 4-unit, buy it, it's a 3-unit. And as a 3-unit, what you're paying, I think, is about $100,000 too much. Well, but no, I have to have a 4-unit. I'm like, I understand, man, but you're buying a 3-unit. You're calling it a 4-unit, right? I mean, if you want to buy a donkey and call it a horse, that's your problem, right? But certainly you're not going to convince me it's a horse, because to me, I can look at it and go, it's a donkey, right? And this person started to convince me, well, it's a great deal. I'm like, well, it's not. It doesn't make any money. Now, if you illegally rent it out and you're okay with it, then that's up to you. I'm not saying what you should do or what you shouldn't do, but certainly you should point that out to the seller that, hey, this is a 3-unit building. The city is not giving you a variance for a 4-unit. So when you should be buying it, you should be buying it as a 3-unit building and pay the price that you would for a 3-unit building. Now, this is not like Berwyn. Like in Berwyn, you can buy a 3-unit, but it's a non-conforming 3-unit. What does that mean? What that means is the village is saying, hey, listen, we're going to let you use it as a 3-unit because it has been used historically as a 3-unit, but it's non-conforming, meaning let's say the 3-unit burns down, something happens, and there's a total loss, and you have to construct a 2-unit structure. They'll let you build it as a 2-unit. They're not going to let you build it as a 3-unit as a new construction. That's called non-conforming. So that's really important to understand the zoning part of it. And last but not least, actually, I have 2 more to go. The last one is going to be, second to last one is going to be, did you pull a FOIA? Last week on Friday, we talked about this, that you have to pull a FOIA before you buy the property, Freedom of Information Act request from the village to know if there's any outstanding bills, if there's any things that are outstanding. So you have to pull a FOIA, right? So that's number one. That is really, really, really important that you do that before you close. And I was giving you guys an example of somebody who literally had a $11,600 worth of fines that were on the FOIA and that were nowhere else. So your title insurance is not valid if your FOIA doesn't work. And then last, but not the least is, did you put insurance on the property? Are your utilities turned on? That would be the 2 ones. So I'll give you guys an example why this is so important. Last year, we had somebody that bought a property, and they bought a property, forgot to put insurance on the property. And I understand a lot of things going on, blah, blah, blah. They're paying cash for the property. So the insurance thing didn't come up because, I'm paying cash for it, who cares? And literally what happened was on the 3rd floor, there was a burst pipe because utilities got turned off. The old owner turned off the utilities and it started leaking because for some reason, and this is, gas companies are notorious for this, Nicor is notorious for this, that they will come and turn off even though you may have started your account, right? They may turn off your gas. So they had a boiler over there, they turned off the gas, put a lock on it, and guess what happened? The pipes froze and it basically started leaking from the top. And they didn't go to the building for 2 or 3 weeks. Right? They didn't go to the building. And by the time they went back, the whole thing, top to bottom, had frozen into an icicle, right? And hundreds of thousands of dollars in loss. And they're like, well, we're going to sue Nicor. We're going to do this or that. I'm like, listen, sue whoever you want. I doubt you're getting anything out of it. It's your building. So please make sure that not only your utilities, if you're going to not go to the property, make sure that you drain the water out, shut down all the water that should be done anyways, and then make sure your heat is working and your account is properly established. So there are 8 or 9 things that should be on your checklist before you close on a property. Those things need to be checked. And I'm assuming, because this is something that people forget, that you have gotten a survey on the property. Please, for God's sake, even if you're buying this property as a distressed property, even if you're buying the property as an auction property, make sure you get a survey done. It'll cost you $450 to $500. It is well worth it. I just came from a property that I just got from an auction. And this is one of the online ones. And guess what? We're closing in the next 30 days or so, but I'm getting surveys done ahead of time that way because the garage kind of sits closer, almost like in the neighbor's yard. It seems like half of it. So I want to make sure that, is the neighbor's fence encroaching me, or is the garage on the property encroaching the neighbor? Because I want to have that ahead of time, because I don't want to have that problem on the back end of the whole thing. So these are important things that you have to pay attention to whenever you're buying. Next thing, when do you need to hire an architect and how do you avoid it? So, well, I guess a couple times you're going to need to have an architect. It depends on if you're in the city of Chicago and you're pulling a long form, you're probably, if you're moving any big walls, you're going to need probably an architect to draw it. Otherwise, they're not going to pass your long form, right? So you have the long form and you have the short form. Short form is you're doing basic things in the property. You're not doing any major structural improvement in the property. That goes in the short form. If you're doing any major stuff in the property, that goes on the long form, right? And the other part of it is, how can you avoid it? Well, I'm not sure you can avoid it if there is an inspection, depending on what town it is in, depending on what particular suburb you're dealing with, or what particular village. So we have an issue right now going on with the town of Schaumburg. We bought a property. It was bought out of the family was selling the property out of a trust, and the homeowner had passed away. I bought it. They had kind of half redone the kitchen. We finished the kitchen, painted the whole house, put new floors, and we got the property up and running. Now the village came back. They're like, oh, no, you did a new bathroom in the kitchen. I'm like, no, man, look at the bathrooms, right? They're ugly looking. We painted the place. We didn't do anything. The shower is the same. We just changed the shower head. We didn't change any of the tile. We didn't change the tub. We didn't do anything. We sprayed the tub, right? But they're basically claiming that, oh, you have to redraw it so this is something we're going back and forth with Schaumburg right now. But guess what? If in Schaumburg, like there's another property we have going where we're putting a second bath in and all this stuff. In that particular case, I have no choice but to have an architect come in and do it. If you're in Lyons, they're going to make you use an architect for any kind of rehab. If you're in Evergreen Park, they're going to make you do an architect for any sort of rehab. Now, if you're in a non-incorporated area, I'm not saying we have done it. I'm just saying we have known people to do the entire rehab, never pull a permit. Now, who do you pull a permit with if you're a non-incorporated area? If you're a non-incorporated area, you pull a permit from the county, right? And the county sometimes can be a pain because the village doesn't have any jurisdiction, or the particular town doesn't have any jurisdiction in that case. So if you're in Cook County, you're going to have to go to Cook County to pull the permit. Now, are there really a lot of people out there policing if you pull the permit or not? No, they're not. I'm not saying you should do it the wrong way. I'm just telling you what the reality of the situation is. So that's kind of how that works. And my suggestion to you would be that if you're going to do any major change in the property, major meaning any major structural change, right? If you're just going to basically take out the tub, you're going to put new plumbing in, new electrical in, hire a licensed plumber, hire an licensed electrician, right? That would make sense because you don't want to burn the house down. You don't want to do the plumbing wrong because now you're going to have to redo it again. So hire a licensed plumber and a licensed electrician, and hopefully they will do it right by the code to begin with. Then you don't have to worry about it, right? But if you're moving any walls, if you're doing any sort of a thing, structural thing, then you want to make sure that you do it. You get an architect. I'll give you guys an example. There was a property for sale from Ryan Smith. Ryan Smith had this property for sale, Elmwood Park. A lot of you that pay attention to properties, you may have seen this. And this was listed, great property, great location, everything was great. But they expanded out the attic and finished the attic. And they just started cutting a lot of the joists, a lot of the rafters, a lot of that kind of stuff in the attic. And there's not enough room, number one. All the things that were cut in the attic, they're not done correctly. And so guess what? Now, you can see that clearly that property, it doesn't have structural problems in terms of foundation. It's perfect. But upstairs, there's a lot of stuff that they cut that's going to now have to go back, remove all of that. You're going to have to close back the attic that they opened up and made it finished living space, because the way it was all done is structurally incorrect. From the outside of the house, you can't tell. But if you go inside the house, clearly it was an amateur that was doing it. Half the things are crooked, and it's just done. And that property 3 or 4 times did not sell on the MLS, and it kept coming back, and Ryan kept lowering the price. And I was interested in that property, but I was interested in it at a much lower price than what he thought at the time he was asking. And so in that type of case, it's clearly somebody who's a complete amateur that was doing it. That should have been done with a proper architect. with an opinion from an architect as to what needs to be removed, what needs to be kept. Is there any additional things that need to be put in place to be able to properly support the roof, to be able to properly support the rest of the framing, and maybe do a little bit of framing around it. So in those types of cases, you do need an architect. Now, how do you avoid an architect? I don't know. Right? In most cases, if you're going to do structural changes, then I think if you don't know what you're doing, you need an architect, right? I'll give you guys an example. There's a property in Des Plaines where we opened up a wall, right? So it's basically we made the doorway larger. And because we made the doorway from the living room to the kitchen larger, now you have to do what is called an LVL beam. Right? Depending on how your joists are running, you have to basically do an LVL beam. LVL beam is simply, sounds fancy, but there's nothing fancy about it, which is all you're doing is you're providing a support structure, right? And so you take 3 pieces of plywood, they're all screwed and glued together. That makes an LVL beam. And is it a 4x6 or 4x8? That's determined of how much load. This is basically a ranch. So a 4x6 was perfectly fine. I'm sorry, 6 this way, right? So the width of it. So not a 4x6, it's just a plywood. And then they put 3 of those together like a sandwich. That's what gives it the structural strength. And then they're putting either a 6-inch or an 8-inch, depending on how much load there is. This was a ranch, so it was fairly simple to do. We put it up there, got it done, closed up the house, we're done with it. City of Des Plaines comes back. Oh my God, you guys did XYZ, you made the opening larger, blah, blah, blah. So then we had to get Chris Badea, the architect, and he had to draw it. They said, hey, whatever they had done, they have done it by the book. It's done correctly. Otherwise, we would have had to go back, retake all the drywall down, and redo the whole thing. So, that's kind of what it is. We did it and messed up. Actually, I didn't do it with a contractor who we had given the house to that, hey, man, get this done. And he screwed up. He screwed up on a couple of houses like that. One house in Des Plaines, one house in Wheeling this year. So on 2 or 3 of these houses, we got dinged. We had to come back and then basically have it drawn. So can you do it? Yes, you can do a lot of things. You can rob a bank. I wouldn't suggest you do it. But can you do it? Sure. But I wouldn't suggest you do it unless you know what you're doing, because it's possible that the village may come back and then basically have you show proof and, hey, you didn't apply for the permits and this and that, and then have to pay a fine. We paid a fine in one of the properties, I'm not sure which one, $1,500 or so. That was not my intention. The contractor did it and later got caught and then created problems. So hopefully that helps. Do you advise landlords take a crime-free seminar? I would strongly advise you that you please go take the crime-free seminar. I don't believe that they charge for it. Don't quote me on that. Or it's $20, $50, something very, very, it's a very, very minor amount of money that they charge for it. Addison does it. A bunch of these cities do it, but take the one that's in person. Yes, you have to go there, get bored for 6-8 hours. I think they'll give you great information. The beauty of that is once you have taken that from one town, then I believe Aurora does it also. A bunch of towns do that. Then you can use that for all the other towns. So you don't have to go take it over and over. One class I would recommend for landlords that is done by CIC. CIC does that, Community Investment Corporation, that I think is excellent. It costs $50 or something like that, is on how to manage property, especially for the city. It's a great, great, great class that they do that's done by CIC. If you have not taken that, I think it will be absolutely worth the time and money that you spend. It's a great class. And I'm not promoting it, not because they make any money on it. It's $60, $80, something like that for the class. But it's absolutely well worth it on how to do good management that complies with all the rules for the city of Chicago, that complies with, how to manage multi-unit properties and that sort of thing. And I think it's worth its weight in gold. So I hope that makes some sense. It's about half an hour. And actually, let me take one last question. So I want to go through this because I think it's an interesting question. And that is, once you pay off a rental property and own it outright, own it free and clear, how do you unlock some of the equity today with all the HELOC and refinance rates so high? So what I would do is this, that if you have a property that is paid off, right, I would go to a small bank, to a portfolio lender, and they will be able to give you, go to a credit union. Credit unions are great for that. Even if, like, say, Navy Federal Credit Union, any one of those types of credit unions, you can join. A lot of them, you can join those if you're not a member. And they will give you a credit line against the property. So what the credit line does is, number one, it'll be about half a point to a point less than what the commercial rates are, number one. Number two, it's basically a balloon, a 5 to 7 year balloon. Number three, with the credit line, you don't have to use it. So if you're not using it today, you can establish the credit line and have it open, right? And the way a credit line is supposed to be used is, it's like a rubber band, right? It's supposed to be used and supposed to be put back. It's supposed to be used, it's supposed to be put back. That's what they want to see. So let's say if you're doing flips, or if you're buying more properties, right? Or if you need flexible money when you need it, right? That is what they want. They want you to use it for 3, 4, 5 months, put it back. So you refinance the property, give it back to them. Then again, use it again, give it back. Again, use it again. It's supposed to be a credit line. It is not supposed to be a loan that you just borrow it and try to pay it back over 7, 8 years. That's not what that type of a loan is for, but it is a wonderful way to not have to pay commercial rate and to pay a rate which is a little bit better than the commercial rate. Plus, it is a commercial loan, so it's not going to show up on your personal credit. That's the great part about it. So if you have a rental property that is paid off, then I would go to a small portfolio lender, to a credit union, borrow do not do a commercial loan there. I'm sorry. Do not do a residential loan there. They will try to talk you into doing a residential loan. Okay? Do not do it. Do not do it, right? You can do a line like that, because on a rental property, they're not going to give you a credit line on a rental property, right? Residential product is not available for that. They'll give you a residential refi, but that's not what you're looking to do. You're basically looking to use the money when you need it, otherwise put it back. If you borrow, let's say 10,000, you're only going to pay interest on 10,000. If you borrow 100,000, you're going to only pay interest 100,000. When you're not using the money, it's sitting there. That month you're paying no interest. So that's the beauty of having a credit line and borrowing money that way. So hopefully this makes sense. Again, thank you everybody for joining. And remember that we are completely sold out of the VIP tickets for the 3-day. It is nada, no VIP tickets left. The regular tickets to attend in person are still available. I think as of today, we were somewhere around 455 or so. There are a total of 600 tickets that were made available this time. We're probably going to be, by the end of this week, we have a Hispanic RIA this week that's coming up on tomorrow or Wednesday, Lori? Tomorrow? Hispanic RIA? Yeah, so tomorrow is Hispanic RIA, and then we have the big vendor showcase on Thursday. So make sure you show up. But if you're going to buy the tickets, buy now and get your, if you want a spouse, if you want a friend to come with you, make sure you let us know. That's buy one, get one free. So you'll get a ticket free, complimentary, that you can bring a friend with you, but make sure you buy it now. How do you buy it? Go to Andrew Holmes, Andrew, Holmes, events.com. AndrewHolmesEvents.com is where you go and buy the ticket. And the VIP, unfortunately, we are sold out at this point. So those are no longer available. There may be a few upgrades you may be able to do depending on the count at the 3-day itself, first thing in the morning. But we'll see. We are not sure yet. We're going to try to see if we can get a few more lunches, but there's a limited amount of 250 lunches we can buy, and that's it. So having said that, thanks a bunch. Super excited. Again, the countdown is on. It's about a week and a half till the 3-day, which is the 17th, 18th, and 19th. Talk to you guys soon, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday. Thanks a bunch.